German pilots were stunned when the sky turned white. In late 1943, Allied bombers deployed massive aluminum chaff known as window. German radar screens flooded with false echoes. Night fighter control collapsed almost instantly. July 24, 1943. 22,000 feet above Hamburg, Germany. The engines of the Avro Lancaster throb through the night like a steady pulse, for Rolls-Royce Merlins drumming in perfect rhythm. Inside the cockpit, Flight Lieutenant Arthur Collins leans forward in his seat, eyes fixed on the dim green glow of his instruments. The North Sea is long behind them. Ahead, somewhere beyond the darkness, lies Hamburg, Germany's second city, a maze of docks, factories, and narrow streets that British planners have marked for destruction. The intercom crackles softly. The navigator, Flying Officer James Hargreaves, checks his stopwatch and looks up. 2 minutes to marker drop. Collins nods, but his attention drifts for a moment to the odd cargo stacked behind the bomb bay bulkhead. Bundles of thin metallic strips, packed into cardboard containers, each no heavier than a book. They are not bombs. They are not flares. Officially, they barely exist at all. The crews have been warned not to talk about them. A new device. A gamble. Below them, far to the east, German radar stations are already awake. At the Würzburg installation outside Bremen, Oberleutnant Karl Weiss of the Luftnachrichten troops stands with his arms folded, staring at the cathode ray tube. He has done this hundreds of times before. The glowing circle is familiar, comforting even. Each echo has a meaning. Each bright return is a bomber, a formation, a threat to be tracked, plotted, and destroyed. The Himmelbett system, the backbone of Germany's night air defense, is a machine built on order. Early warning Freya radar sees the enemy coming. Würzburg tracks them precisely. Controllers feed vectors to night fighters waiting in the dark. Bf-110s and Ju-88s rise smoothly, guided by calm voices on the radio. Once visual contact is made, the bomber dies alone, swallowed by flame. It has worked. Too well. Tonight, Weiss notices the first anomaly just after 0:30 hours. A faint shimmer blooms on the edge of the screen, not sharp like an aircraft return, but hazy. He leans closer. Interference? A junior operator asks. Weiss shakes his head. Weather can cause clutter, but this is different. The shimmer grows, spreading inward, multiplying. Within seconds, the scope is alive with echoes. Hundreds of them. Thousands. The sky, as far as the radar can see, has turned white. Control. This is Würzburg 3. Weiss says into the handset, struggling to keep his voice level. We are receiving massive returns, unable to isolate targets. In the Lancaster, the bomb aimer pulls a lever. From the aircraft's belly, the first bundles fall away. The cardboard casings split open, and the strips scatter, tumbling end over end. Each piece is cut to a precise length, half the wavelength of German radar. As they drift downward, they reflect radio waves perfectly. To radar, they look like bombers. More Lancasters follow. Hundreds of them. Each aircraft releases its load at slightly different intervals, creating a vast, slowly moving cloud of false targets. The strips fall gently, hanging in the air like metallic snow. On the ground, the German system begins to unravel. At a sector control bunker near Lübeck, Hauptmann Ernst Vogel grips his headset tighter with every passing second. His plotting table, once a clear map of enemy movement, is now chaos. Operators shout conflicting bearings. Markers overlap. The neat bomber stream has vanished beneath a blizzard of signals. Which one is real? Someone yells. No one answers. Night fighter crews are already in the air. Lieutenant Franz Becker, flying a Ju-88C, listens as his controller's voice falters. Becker. Standby, targets, everywhere. Aye. The transmission dissolves into static. Becker scans the darkness ahead.
No silhouettes. No exhaust glows.
Just black sky and the faint reflection of moonlight off the wings. His Liechtenstein onboard radar is useless, its screen filled with dancing noise. What the hell have they done? His radar operator mutters. In Hamburg, the first Pathfinder flares ignite, bathing the city in ghostly green light. Sirens begin to wail, but the warning is confused, delayed. The bombers are already there. Inside the Lancaster, Collins feels the aircraft shudder slightly as the bomb bay doors open. Below them, the city spreads out, eerily calm, unaware that its defenses have been blinded. The gamble has worked. For the first time in the war, the German night fighter control system cannot see the enemy. Above Germany, aluminum strips drift silently through the air, and an entire doctrine of air defense collapses in real time. July 25, 1943, 0:47 hours. Luftwaffe Sector Control, Northern Germany. Hauptmann Ernst Vogel feels sweat gathering under his collar despite the cool air of the bunker. The concrete walls, designed to withstand near misses, seem to press inward as the noise rises. Telephones ringing unanswered, operators shouting grid references that no longer make sense, officers leaning over radar scopes that now resemble snow-covered fields instead of precision instruments. "This is impossible," Vogel mutters, staring at the plotting table. The bomber stream should be clear by now, one corridor, one flow, moving steadily toward Hamburg. Instead, the map is drowning in symbols. Chalk marks overlap. Erasures smear into dust. Every sector reports the same thing. Too many targets. At the Freya early warning station near Heligoland, technicians attempt frantic recalibrations. Gain down. Gain up. Filters adjusted. Nothing changes. The echoes remain. Dense, drifting, multiplying as if the enemy has filled the entire sky with aircraft. "Oberleutnant," a radar corporal says quietly, fear edging his voice. "The returns are moving, but they're falling. Falling." Vogel freezes. Bombers do not fall at that speed, not uniformly, not across such a wide front. The realization flickers across his face. Half-formed. Unwelcome. This is not an air armada. This is something else. In the darkness above, Lieutenant Franz Becker banks his Ju-88 sharply, searching for any sign of life ahead. His cockpit is lit by red instrument glow, his breath loud in his oxygen mask. The radio remains silent except for bursts of overlapping voices. Controllers stepping on one another, commands cut off mid-sentence. Becker vector, no, ignore, stand by, static. The Liechtenstein radar display in front of his operator is a mess of spikes and ghost returns. No single contact holds long enough to lock on. "I can't pick one," the operator says. "They're everywhere. Or nowhere." Becker clenches his jaw. Night fighting has always been a craft built on patience and precision. Climb, vector, intercept. Tonight the craft is gone. The sky has become an empty ocean filled with mirages. Below, Hamburg burns. The first wave of high explosives tears open roofs and streets, ripping apart water mains and gas lines. Then the incendiaries fall, thousands of them, clattering across shattered buildings, igniting fires that quickly merge into walls of flame. Smoke rises in towering columns, glowing orange from within. On the ground, air raid wardens scream conflicting orders. Shelters fill too fast. Some civilians hesitate, waiting for an all-clear that never comes. The warning system has failed them just as completely as the radar has failed the pilots overhead. Back in the control bunker, Vogel finally slams his fist onto the table. "Stop launching fighters," he shouts. The room falls briefly silent. "We are throwing them into blindness." He continues, voice tight. "Recall what you can. This is not interception. This is chaos." But the order comes too late for many. Fighters already airborne wander uselessly through the dark, burning precious fuel while the bomber stream passes untouched above them. At Luftwaffe headquarters, messages begin to arrive. Fragmented, urgent, contradictory. Hamburg is under heavy attack. Radar contact lost. Night fighters unable to engage. The tone shifts from confusion to disbelief. No one yet knows the name of the weapon that has done this. They only know that, for the first time since the night war began, the hunters have lost their eyes. And somewhere over Germany, aluminum strips continue to drift downward, silent, unstoppable, rewriting the rules of the sky. July 25, 1943, 1:18 hours.
Reich Air Ministry, Berlin.
Colonel Wolfgang Martini stands rigid in front of a long table scattered with reports, his sharp eyes moving from page to page as if speed alone might force clarity out of chaos. Martini is no ordinary officer. As head of Luftwaffe Signals Intelligence, he understands radar the way an artilleryman understands trajectories or a pilot understands airspeed. He helped build the system now collapsing in real time, and what he is reading makes his stomach tighten.
Hamburg, radar blinded.
Night fighters, unable to acquire targets. Freya and Würzburg, overwhelmed by false returns. This is not coincidence. This is not weather. This was predicted. Martini says quietly, almost to himself. Several officers glance at him. Years earlier, German scientists had warned of a theoretical vulnerability in radar, simple, elegant, terrifying. If the enemy released strips of metal cut to resonate at radar wavelengths, the echoes would multiply. A single bomber could appear as 100. 100 bombers could look like the end of the world. The British, the Germans believed, would never dare to use it. If they did, Germany could copy it. Mutual restraint had kept the idea locked away, discussed only in secure rooms, buried in classified memoranda. A weapon too dangerous to unleash. Martini looks up. They have broken the agreement, he says flatly. In Hamburg, Lieutenant Becker finally gives up the hunt. His fuel gauges dip toward empty, and his cockpit reeks of sweat and frustration. Below him, the city is a furnace. The heat columns punch upward, buffeting his aircraft. For a moment, he glimpses something. Dark shapes crossing the glow.
Bombes.
Too late. They're just flying through, his radar operator whispers. No flak bursts near them.
No fighters intercept.
The bomber stream is intact, disciplined, unstoppable. Becker turns away, helpless, as if abandoning a burning ship he cannot save. Inside a Lancaster farther north, Flight Lieutenant Collins feels a strange, unsettling calm. The German flak is lighter than expected. Searchlights stab at empty sky. There is no sign of interceptors. They can't see us, the rear gunner says, disbelief in his voice. Collins does not reply. He knows superstition when he hears it. But deep down, he feels it too, the eerie sensation of invisibility. On the ground, Hamburg's firestorm begins to form. Winds rush inward at hurricane strength, feeding the flames. People are knocked off their feet by the heat alone. Oxygen is sucked from cellars and shelters. The city becomes its own weapon, killing indiscriminately. By the time the last bombers turn for home, entire districts are gone. At dawn, reconnaissance photographs reveal the truth in stark black and white. Square miles of destruction.
Industrial zona zarasa.
Residential blocks flattened. And all of it achieved with losses far below expectations. In Berlin, Martini signs a directive with a steady hand. Immediate investigation. Recover samples if possible. Develop countermeasures at once. The Luftwaffe understands now. The night war has changed. The enemy has found a way not to fight the system but to drown it. And as sunlight glints off thousands of aluminum strips still scattered across fields, forests, and rivers, German technicians bend down to pick them up, turning them over in their hands like fragments of a shattered mirror. They know what this means. The sky will never look the same again. July 25, 1943. Dawn. Outskirts of Hamburg. The sun rises slowly through a veil of smoke, its light filtered into a dull red disk that barely cuts through the haze. The countryside outside the city is unnaturally quiet.
No engines. No sirens.
Only the crackle of distant fires and the low murmur of survivors moving through the ruins. Along a country road near Bergedorf, a Luftwaffe signals detachment fans out across a field. Boots crunch over ash and flattened crops. Corporal Hans Richter bends down and picks something up between his fingers. A thin strip of metal. It is light as paper, cool to the touch, and unremarkable in every way, except for the fact that it lies everywhere. In ditches, in trees, on rooftops, thousands of identical slivers glint faintly in the weak morning light. Richter hands it to his officer. Sir, this is what did it. The officer turns it over slowly, already knowing the answer. He slips it into a marked envelope. By noon, similar envelopes will be on their way to Berlin from all across northern Germany. Inside a battered bunker on the edge of the city, Hauptmann Ernst Vogel has not slept. His uniform is stained with dust and sweat. He stares at the situation map, now eerily clean, stripped of the chaos that filled it only hours earlier. The calm is worse. Reports filter in steadily. Casualty estimates climbing by the hour. Entire neighborhoods gone. Communications still down in some sectors. The magnitude of the failure presses on him like a physical weight. Vogel lights a cigarette with trembling hands. "We were blind," he says to no one in particular. Completely blind. In Berlin, Colonel Martini convenes an emergency briefing. Engineers, physicists, radar officers, men pulled from laboratories and command posts alike, crowd into the room. On the table lie several envelopes, each containing the same thing. Aluminum chaff. Martini holds one strip up between thumb and forefinger. "This," he says, "is why Hamburg burned." He explains it quickly, clinically. Resonance, wavelength, reflection. The physics are simple enough that the room grows quiet not with confusion, but with dread. One of the engineers speaks up. "Herr Oberst, we discussed this years ago. We assumed the British would not. They have," Martini cuts in, "and now the restraint is gone." The implications ripple outward instantly. If the British can do this, so can the Americans. Every bomber stream, every night raid, radar, Germany's greatest defensive advantage, has been reduced to a suggestion. "What about countermeasures?" someone asks. Martini exhales slowly. Filters, new procedures, visual confirmation. But none of it will be ready in time. In Hamburg, rescue crews move like ghosts through streets that no longer resemble streets at all. Firefighters spray water into ruins that still glow with heat. Bodies are carried out wrapped in blankets or left where they fell unrecognizable. Civilians whisper the same question again and again. Why didn't the fighters come? The Luftwaffe has no answer it can give. That afternoon, reconnaissance aircraft fly over the devastated city. Their cameras record mile after mile of blackened ground. The images are rushed to Berlin, to London, to Washington. In Allied headquarters, officers study them in silence. The losses are horrific. But so is the conclusion. The bomber has broken through. And it did not do so with speed or altitude, but with deception. As evening approaches, German radar operators return to their stations. The scopes glow once more. The screens are clean, normal, but no one trusts them now. Every echo is suspect. Every return might be another lie drifting down from the sky. The war in the air has entered a new phase, one where seeing no longer means believing. July 26, 1943. Luftwaffe Night Fighter Command, Delen Air Base, Netherlands. Major Wilhelm Schenk stands on the edge of the tarmac as dawn burns away the last of the mist. Around him, night fighters sit in ragged rows. Bf-110s and Ju-88s streaked with soot and oil, their crews moving slowly, exhausted, hollow-eyed. The air smells of fuel, damp grass, and failure. Inside the operations building, the mood is worse. Controllers replay the night again and again, walking through the timelines, the calls, the moments where the system should have worked, and didn't. The Himmelbett boxes, once precise zones of interception, are now meaningless diagrams on a wall. Radar contact lost at 041. Multiple false echoes. Visual acquisition impossible. Schenk listens without interruption. He has flown night interceptions himself. He knows the unspoken truth hanging in the room. Skill no longer matters if the system feeding the pilots lies to them. A junior officer finally asks the question everyone is avoiding. "Sir, what do we do next time?" Schenk does not answer immediately. Outside, ground crews pull aluminum strips from wheel wells and landing gear, chaff that clung to aircraft returning from futile patrols. "We improvise," he says at last. "And we bleed while doing it." That same morning in England, at RAF Bomber Command Headquarters, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris studies the Hamburg damage report. He does not smile. Harris is not a sentimental man, but even he understands the scale of what has been unleashed. Window, so long debated, so long withheld, has worked beyond expectation. A staff officer clears his throat. Sir, German losses were minimal. Fighter opposition almost non-existent. Harris nods slowly. They'll adapt. He knows they must. The Germans are engineers, methodical and stubborn. Filters will be devised. Procedures rewritten. But adaptation takes time. And time Harris intends to spend lavishly. Every raid from now on uses it, he says. No exceptions. Back in Germany, Colonel Martini receives the first countermeasure proposals. Narrower radar beams. Doppler discrimination. Ground observers paired with radar cues. None of it inspires confidence. One physicist is blunt. We can reduce the clutter, he says. But we cannot remove it. The sky will never be clean again. In the Ruhr, factory workers find aluminum strips tangled in fences and machinery. Children collect them like curiosities. Some civilians weave them into hats or decorations, not yet understanding that these scraps are harbingers of more nights like Hamburg. On July 27th, the bombers return, this time to Essen. Radar stations report the same nightmare. False returns blossom across the scopes, drifting and merging until controllers can no longer tell where the bomber stream truly is. Night fighters scramble anyway, sent aloft more out of habit than hope. Lieutenant Becker flies again, though he knows the odds. His radar operator watches the screen dissolve into static once more. It's happening again, he says quietly. Becker grips the controls, feeling a cold anger settle in his chest. The enemy is not beating him with courage or marksmanship. They are beating him with mathematics. Below, Essen's factories erupt in flame. By the time Becker lands, he has not fired a single shot. Across Germany, a realization takes hold. Not sudden, but creeping and inescapable. The night defense, the pride of the Reich, is no longer a shield. It is a thin curtain riddled with holes. And behind that curtain, the bombers are coming back. Again and again, hidden by a sky full of lies. August 1943. Central Germany. Night Fighter Training Detachment. The classroom smells of chalk dust and stale coffee. On the wall, a large map of Germany is pocked with pins. Red for recent raids, black for losses. The red pins are multiplying faster now. Major Wilhelm Schenk stands at the front, his flying jacket draped over the back of a chair. In his hand is a piece of aluminum chaff, bent and dull from handling. Forget the old rules, he says to the pilots seated before him. They are dead. The men listen in silence. Most are veterans. They have kills painted under their canopies, medals on their chests. None of that feels solid anymore. Schenk taps the chalkboard where a Würzburg radar schematic is half erased. You cannot trust ground control. You cannot trust your onboard radar. From now on, you fly by instinct, by sound, by shadow. He pauses, letting the weight of that sink in. This is not doctrine. This is desperation. Night fighters begin flying higher, then lower, then weaving through bomber streams hoping for visual contact alone. Crews switch off radar entirely at times, afraid the ghost echoes will lead them astray. Some pilots try stalking the fires themselves, circling burning cities in hopes of catching stragglers silhouetted against the glow. Losses climb, not just among bombers, but among fighters crashing from fuel exhaustion, mid-air collisions, spatial disorientation. Lieutenant Franz Becker experiences it firsthand on a moonless night over Kassel. He spots a faint shape ahead, darker than the sky, moving steadily. He pushes the throttles forward, heart hammering. For 3 seconds, the silhouette sharpens. A Lancaster. He squeezes the trigger. Cannon fire streaks forward, tearing into the bomber's wing. Flames bloom. The Lancaster rolls, disappears into the dark. Becker exhales, shaking. It is his first kill in weeks. But when he lands, he learns the truth. 30 bombers reached the target. 1 did not. The arithmetic is merciless. In Berlin, Colonel Martini watches the loss curves with a scientist's detachment that barely masks his dread. Each new countermeasure buys minutes, not safety. Each procedural change is met by Allied adaptation. The British vary chaff lengths. They change drop patterns. They thicken the clouds. American bombers join the night war with their own versions. The sky fills not just with aircraft, but with metallic fog. German radar operators develop a new habit, listening for engine noise outside their bunkers, trusting their ears more than their scopes. Some begin marking likely bomber corridors by intuition alone. Does it feel heavy tonight? One operator asks another before a raid. Heavy becomes a word of dread. Civilians notice the change too. Sirens sound later, sometimes not at all. Nights once punctuated by flak and searchlights now pass in eerie quiet, until bombs fall without warning. The confidence that once underpinned Germany's home front erodes. Whispers spread in shelters and factories. They can't stop them anymore. For the Luftwaffe, the most painful realization is not technological, it is psychological. Their enemies are no longer fighting the air defenses head-on. They are bypassing them, rendering them irrelevant. The sky itself has become a weapon. And as aluminum strips continue to rain down across the Reich, the men tasked with defending it are forced to confront an unthinkable truth. October 1943. Luftwaffe Sector Control Bunker, near Kassel. 0:11 hours. The room is quieter than it has ever been. Not calm quiet. Telephones sit untouched for long stretches. Operators remain at their stations, headsets on, eyes fixed to glowing scopes that offer nothing but drifting ghosts. The frantic shouting of earlier months has faded, replaced by long pauses broken only by the soft hum of electronics and the distant, almost imagined sound of engines passing overhead. Hauptmann Ernst Vogel stands behind the plotting table, hands clasped behind his back. He watches his men more than the radar now. He knows the look in their eyes. It is the look of people who have stopped believing their tools will save them. A controller finally speaks into his microphone. Night Fighter Group 3, we have no reliable vectors.
Repeat, no reliable vectors.
There is no reply. The fighters are airborne anyway, scattered across the darkness like blind men searching for footsteps in the snow. Vogel turns away from the scopes and looks at the wall clock. Each minute that passes without contact is not a reprieve. It is a confirmation. They are already there. Above Kassel, bomb bay doors open in smooth sequence. The bombers fly in disciplined lanes, crews calm, voices steady. Chaff pours out in thick streams, replenishing the cloud even as it drifts and thins. The system is now refined, practiced, routine. Inside one Lancaster, a young wireless operator named Thomas Reed listens to German radio chatter bleeding through the static. He does not understand the words, but he understands the tone. Confusion, overlap, desperation. They sound lost, he says quietly. His pilot does not answer. He is watching the altimeter, the airspeed, the steady line of instruments that still tell the truth. Below, Kassel's rail yards erupt. Explosions roll outward, one after another, methodical and precise. Fires take hold quickly. The night fighters arrive too late to matter. Back in the bunker, Vogel receives the first damage reports before the bombers have even turned for home. He sets them aside without reading further. He already knows the shape of the night. At 2:04 hours, a radar operator removes his headset and sets it down carefully. "I can't do this anymore," he says, not loudly, not angrily, just tired. No one reprimands him. In Berlin, Colonel Martini watches the same pattern unfold across maps and charts. Kassel,
Frankfurt, Bremen.
Each raid follows the same rhythm. Radar confusion, fighter impotence, destruction on the ground. The counters evolve. New filters are installed. Operators are retrained. Visual belts are established. None of it restores what has been lost. The enemy does not need to be invisible forever, only long enough. Among Luftwaffe crews, a dark humor spreads. Pilots joke about chasing aluminum ghosts. Controllers refer to weather made of metal. Laughter becomes a way to survive the humiliation. But beneath it lies something more corrosive: doubt. For the first time, Germany's air defenders begin to question not how to stop the bombers, but whether stopping them is still possible at all. And when belief collapses, systems follow. As the bombers fade westward and the fires continue to burn, the bunker remains quiet. No triumphant calls, no confirmed kills, only the steady ticking of the clock. Time passing, and with each passing night, the sky grows whiter, and the silence of the controllers grows heavier. November 1943, RAF Bomber Command Headquarters, High Wycombe, England. The room smells faintly of tobacco smoke and damp wool. Maps cover the walls, layered with grease pencil markings that trace routes across Europe like surgical incisions. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris stands with his hands clasped behind his back, listening as intelligence officers speak in low, precise tones. They're adapting, one of them says, but slowly. On the table lie captured documents, decoded signals, and aerial reconnaissance photos. Together, they tell a story the Luftwaffe would rather keep secret. Improvised procedures, strained morale, rising losses among night fighters not from combat, but from accidents. They're flying without guidance, another officer adds. Visual only. Radar discipline is breaking down. Harris nods once. He does not interrupt. The enemy has revealed himself, not through bravado, but through weakness. Back in Germany, Lieutenant Franz Becker reads a notice tacked to the squadron board. New interception procedures. New altitudes. New hope, the paper implies. Becker does not feel it. He has flown 6 sorties in the last 10 days. He has seen nothing, fired nothing, returned exhausted, empty-handed, each time watching the horizon glow as cities burn without him. One night, circling uselessly above a sea of chaff, Becker switches off his radio entirely. The voices are worse than silence now. In the bomber stream, Thomas Reed listens again to German transmissions breaking through the ether. This time, he understands enough to catch a phrase repeated again and again.
Keine klare Lage.
No clear situation. The words linger in his mind as the bombs fall. On the ground, German civilians begin to speak openly about it. In queues, in shelters, in factories during breaks stolen from exhaustion. They don't know where the bombers are anymore, someone whispers. The knowledge spreads faster than the fires. In Berlin, Colonel Martini sits alone late into the night, reviewing reports he has already memorized. The physics are unchanged. The mathematics are cruelly consistent. The enemy does not need perfect deception, only enough to overwhelm decision-making. Radar was meant to compress uncertainty. Window expands it. Martini closes the file and stares at the darkened city outside his office. Somewhere beyond the blackout, Allied bombers are already forming up for another night. The Luftwaffe has learned the truth too late. Technology does not fail all at once. It fails by erosion, by confidence leaking away, by operators second-guessing every signal, by commanders hesitating when seconds matter. By the end of November, the night war has settled into a grim routine.
Bomber arrive.
Chaff falls. Radar whites out. Fighters scramble blindly. Cities burn. The surprise is gone. The advantage remains. And as winter closes in, one thing becomes clear on both sides of the conflict. The sky has chosen its winner, not through firepower alone, but through the quiet collapse of certainty. January 1944. Luftwaffe Night Fighter Command Conference, Berlin. The room is overheated. The windows blacked out despite the pale winter daylight beyond them. Coats hang from chair backs. Steam rises from wet boots left near the door. The men gathered around the long table look older than their ranks suggest. Charts line the walls, loss curves, interception rates, sortie effectiveness. Every line slopes the wrong way. Major Wilhelm Schenk listens as a staff officer finishes his presentation. The numbers hang in the air, unarguable, merciless. We are engaging less than 10% of the bomber stream, the officer concludes. Confirmed kills are declining. Fuel expenditure is increasing. Crew fatigue is critical. No one speaks for several seconds. Finally, Schenk breaks the silence. Then say it plainly. The officer swallows. Sir, the night defense can no longer deny access to German airspace. It is the sentence everyone has come to hear, and the one no one wanted spoken aloud. In earlier years, such an admission would have been unthinkable. The night fighter arm had been elite, disciplined, confident, technologically advanced. Now it is being asked to operate in a sky that actively lies to it. Colonel Martini sits at the far end of the table, fingers steepled. He has already accepted this outcome. To him, it is not defeat, it is a solved equation. The enemy has removed our ability to discriminate, he says calmly. When you cannot tell truth from noise, decision-making collapses. That is the real damage. Outside the conference room, snow falls quietly on Berlin's streets. Somewhere beyond the city, Allied bombers are forming up again, their routes plotted with the expectation, not hope, that they will reach their targets. That night, Lieutenant Franz Becker flies one more patrol over central Germany. The mission briefing is brief, almost perfunctory. Expect heavy chaff. Visual engagement only. Becker nods, saying nothing. In the air, he sees the familiar shimmer long before the first bombs fall. The silver fog is thicker than ever, layered, deliberate. It is no longer just a screen, it is terrain. He flies through it anyway. For a moment, the world becomes disorienting. Reflections dance across the canopy. His instruments flicker. He levels out by feel alone. Then, ahead of him, a single dark shape emerges. A bomber, isolated. Becker closes in, heart pounding, lining up the shot. He fires. The rounds strike home. The bomber begins to burn, falling away into the darkness below. For a brief instant, it feels like the old days. But as he pulls away, Becker sees the truth stretching out around him. Dozens of fires on the ground, more bombers already gone, untouched. One kill does not change the night. It does not change the war. When Becker lands, ground crew tally the victory with practiced motions. No one celebrates. Across Germany, January raids continue with grim regularity. The defenses respond automatically, ritualistically. Fighters rise. Radar whites out. Bombers pass. Cities burn. The Luftwaffe has crossed a line it cannot step back over. The realization settles slowly, painfully, but permanently. The night war is no longer winnable on its own terms. And in the white, deceptive sky above, the future of the air war has already taken shape. February 1944. Western Germany. 2:22 hours. The wind carries the distant sound of engines long before the radar notices anything at all. In a bunker outside Cologne, a junior operator tilts his head, listening. He has learned to trust that instinct more than the scope in front of him. The screen is already beginning to haze over. Faint, spreading flecks that signal the inevitable. Window, he says quietly. No one reacts. The word has lost its power to shock. Hauptmann Ernst Vogel stands beside the plotting table, older now, his posture subtly stooped. He does not order a scramble immediately. He waits, counts the seconds between the first shimmer and the moment when decision no longer matters. Only then does he nod. Launch, he says. The fighters rise into a sky that has already betrayed them. By now, both sides understand exactly what Window has done. It has not merely blinded radar, it has shifted the entire balance of initiative. The attacker chooses when and where to appear. The defender reacts, late and uncertain, forever chasing certainty that dissolves on contact. In England, the weapon is no longer discussed with awe or hesitation. It is simply part of the checklist. Chaff out, intervals correct, stream intact. A generation of bomber crews has grown up inside the white sky, trusting it the way earlier crews trusted altitude or speed. They know it is not magic. They know it will not protect them forever. But for now, it is enough. In Germany, the psychological toll deepens. Radar operators second-guess every return. Controllers hesitate before committing fighters. Pilots fly with the knowledge that success depends as much on chance as on skill. The system still functions, but without faith. That spring, Allied planners prepare for something even larger. Day and night operations begin to blur together. The skies over Europe fill with aircraft in numbers unimaginable just 2 years earlier. Window becomes a constant presence, drifting across front lines, coastlines, cities, fields. Aluminum strips fall on Normandy hedgerows before the first soldier ever lands there. On one final patrol before reassignment, Lieutenant Franz Becker circles above a burning target and realizes something with startling clarity. He no longer feels anger, only resignation. The war in the air has passed him by. It no longer rewards mastery. It rewards scale, coordination, and the ability to overwhelm perception itself. When Becker lands that night, he removes his headset slowly, carefully, as if setting down something fragile. In Berlin, Colonel Martini pens a memo that will later be studied long after the war is over. In it, he does not dwell on Hamburg or Kassel or the dead. He writes instead about uncertainty, about how modern war is no longer fought solely with weapons, but with the manipulation of information. If the enemy controls what you see, he writes, he controls what you decide. Above Germany, the bombers continue westward, their passage marked not just by fire, but by a faint metallic snowfall that glitters briefly in the moonlight before disappearing into the dark. The sky turns white again, and in that whiteness, an era of warfare quietly ends, replaced by one where deception, not destruction, opens the door to everything that follows.